Appamada and its programs are supported by your generosity, and your generosity and support makes such a difference. You can find a link for contributions on the website at appamada.org. Thank you.
So good morning, everyone. It's great to see you all this morning. This is a much bigger crowd than I ever expected. So it's wonderful to see you all. So I'd like to send out, oh, you know what? Nancy, do you know how to record? Maybe we should do that.
Oh, I'm recording right now.
Oh, you are? Okay, didn't know that. Okay, great. Thank you. So anyway, I'd like to send out a welcome to everyone here in Austin and the Sanghas in Madison, England, Switzerland, Hawaii, Chicago, and Alpine, and other points in between. It's wonderful to have you all here. So depending on your time zone, it will be good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. So today I would like to propose a question of whether loving kindness, compassion, and generosity really exist in Austin, Texas, in this country, in this crazy world that we're living in today. So I'd like to study the basis of this inquiry is on the events of this last week during this winter storm, which lasted approximately from February 13th to February 17th. And its aftermath, which is still going on for some people. So to begin with, I'd like to look specifically at Austin because that's where I live and that's what I have some knowledge about. So first of all, I'd like to kind of go over, which most of you know all this, but just to go over to form a framework of the physical aspect of last week. So what happened? So starting on Sunday, I guess, the subarctic temperatures began. They arrived on Sunday along with sleet. At least I'm talking here in Austin again. It's a little bit different in Fort Worth, I think, maybe. Anyway, and then there were massive car collisions, and specifically in Fort Worth and here in Austin as well. And then we got the heavy snow the following day, which was with even colder temperatures, and some people got down to 6 degrees, I understand, in this area, some areas around Austin. So thus began the stress on the power grid and the problem with the frozen windmills in West Texas, causing massive failure in the grid with extensive power outages. And then we had the rolling blackouts that never seemed to roll. At the same time, we were told to run our faucets, right, from the beginning, run our faucets all the time, and to keep them from freezing, and which caused a major stress on the water supply eventually. And as a result, we ended up with really low pressures or no water at all for some folks. So, and despite the precaution of running faucets, some people, such as myself, ended up with broken pipes and resultant flooding. Now, I was fortunate because I have a pier and beam house and it broke under the house, and so the water flooded out all right into the yard. But some people, you know, it was in their, it was in their house. The pipes were in the house and they broke, and subsequently flooded the houses, and then other people had their roofs collapse, right? And in some apartments and some houses as well, from the weight of the snow. The structure couldn't tolerate it. And then last, but certainly not least, was the long, slow grocery lines that wove around the buildings outside the HEBs and other groceries, which, you know, doesn't seem so bad, but it was cold when you're waiting for an hour with a torn boot, I'm telling you. Anyway, and then once inside, people found stores, certain objects were not there, you know, like water was, depending on when you went, you couldn't find it, and things like eggs and other items were absent. So initially in this town and in the country, there were institutional, what I call institutional responses, which is the warming shelters that crept up here and there in elementary schools. And people could go there to stay and, you know, have cots and what. The closing of the roads and businesses, which was a really smart idea. And from the get-go, pretty much since Monday, people were saying, stay at home. You know, that was the official word from the media, which was so important to have them say that, because a lot of people were going to stick to it and try to get out in the bad weather anyway, which is problematic for other drivers, right? Collide into each other. So the local media was doing that, these constant updates of what's going on with everything. And then the national and international media, which surprised me, you know, had a lot of stories, and consequently, you know, people from all over were getting calls, some internationally. And I know I got calls from my mother and my cousins from Florida. So that was remarkable for me. Didn't expect that. And then the national government, with their pronouncement of the disaster, is going to provide, you know, resources and services from FEMA and other agencies, disaster agencies for the city, of all of Texas, actually. And then another thing that really helped, I think, was the city council. Some city council members were very, very good at responding daily with the latest update, what you could find, where you could go, and call them in particular if you had some particular problem. Just fantastic. I was very pleasantly surprised about that. The mayor also had a response to it all. And there was an eventual sanding of walkways, which was nice, really nice. And then at grocery stores, there were limits on purchases of certain items, such as water, that eventually took effect, which was important. So and I'd like to talk about the local response, but I would like to talk about it in terms of my own experience. So I'll just tell you my story. So the first 2 days, that Sunday and Monday, I was on Easy Street. I had power and water, and I was enjoying being out in the snow and playing and wandering through the neighborhood and watching the kids slide down the hills, and, you know, they were having a grand time. And, you know, if you got power and water, snow is wonderful. Cold temperatures are okay. So I was, at some point, I was feeling pretty guilty, because I knew a lot of people were out of power from the get-go. My brother was one of them. The first 2 days he was out of power. And so he called me up and asked if he could stay the night because I had power. Sure. So he came over, and so I was up most of the night with him because he's a night owl. And we were visiting, and finally at 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, he decided to go to bed, and I did too. But then Ollie started this. I don't know what was up. I didn't know what was up with Ollie. He was just, Ollie's my dog, by the way. Kept fussing at me about one thing or another. I'm going, what? You know, this is the time when we can go to sleep, you know? And so anyway, he was leading me into the living room, and we went into the living room, and all of a sudden there's this loud crack and then thud, which was a branch in the front yard. And then as I looked out the window, I saw a yellow light, a flash, and then a pop. And that was the transformer for the street on the other side of me. And then we went to the other side of the yard to look and see what was going on. And the same thing, there was a crack and a thud and a blue light flashing, and there went the power. So, and then, so I thought, oh God, Ollie, let's just go out to bed and get warm. And so we did, but he still kept fussing at me, you know, to be there. He wanted to go out, and I'm going, no, this is not going to happen. So anyway, I finally dragged him to bed, and then the next morning, the next morning, I got up and, you know, realized what had happened, that the back crash was my apricot tree splitting in half, and the front was a limb off my big tree. And then I looked out and I saw a ton of water in the backyard. And I thought, gosh, I knew it was going to rain, but I didn't think it would rain that much. So I decided, well, okay, my main concern here is I have no electricity, so I need firewood. And I didn't have any firewood. Well, I had 3 pieces, but they never have burned. I don't know what's wrong with them, but they don't burn. And I tried before, and I still keep them. I don't know why they don't burn. But anyway, so I went out and got my 1x2s and whacked those up, and then I started perusing well, that's not true. I was bringing those inside, and then I all of a sudden started really paying attention to this sound I heard, and it was a whirring sound, and it took me a little while, and I realized it was apparently a generator. There's a assisted living home down the street from me, and so that was keeping the older people safe, right, and not safe and warm, and so I thought, okay, that's what that is. And then I was paying a little bit more closer attention, and I realized that there was the sound of gushing of water. And it turns out all that water that I thought was rain was actually a pipe that broke. So then it was a mad scramble to try to figure out how to turn off the water. And I got my water tool, the little cutoff valve tool, and went out, and it took me a while to figure out anyway how to do that. But then a couple of neighbors came over and borrowed my tool, and anyway, between the 3 of us, we figured it out. So then I had 2 problems now. I had neither water or electricity. So I did notice online that there were people starting to offer firewood, and so I got online and kind of put out a call, and meanwhile, somebody that I knew had called me and said, well, I'm going to cancel the appointment I have with you today. Anything you need, we're doing well. And I said, well, if you got any firewood, it'd be good. And as it turned out, she had a ton of firewood and promptly brought some over later in the afternoon. Of course, that was after my power came back on, but still, it was nice to have it, because the power was going on and off, right, for some time. And so it was unstable. So it was good to have that as a fallback. And then, so then it was down. Okay, so I had heat. That was good. And I just didn't have water. And I have learned how much water I use. It's a tremendous amount of water just to brush your teeth. It takes a whole bottle of water. I mean, you've got to clean the brush in anyway. Yeah. So much less washing dishes or boiling water for coffee or what have you. So it's a ton of water. So anyway, I had to go to the store to buy some water. And in the interim, while I was, again, looking to find out what's going on in the city and what people are doing and whatnot, there were people that were offering boiled water and non-boiled water and come get it, and people saying we've got charging services, you know, we got a long line out there, electrical line, come on over. And it's just like, oh my gosh, you know, so many offerings. It's just really tremendous. And I didn't need any of that, but anyway, I needed water, but I thought, well, I'll go try to buy some first. So I happened to go to I was going to go to HEB. Oh, and some lady was collecting items for a warming shelter, that the people showing up at the warming shelter didn't bring any food, they didn't bring any water, they didn't have adequate clothing and gloves and socks and underwear. And so I thought, well, I'm going to go get water for myself. I might as well, you know, pick up some stuff for, you know, those people. So off I went in my car, and the roads were starting to not be so icy. And so I went to the dollar store, and it was, you know, had a lot of people in it, as you might imagine. And so I was, you know, getting snacks and whatnot, and then I was hunting for water, and I ended up running into some, well, not really running into them, but anyway, we approached the water at the same time from different directions and had to navigate that in a real kind of tight aisle. And anyway, I got to talking with this guy. It's this African-American guy. And so I was asking him, I said, oh, so you got water? And he said, no, I'm buying this for my daughter. You know, she ran out of water and bottled water. And then he said, and yeah, I'm getting some stuff for some other people. And I thought, oh, this is a nice guy, right? He's helping folks out. And anyway, so as it turned out, I ended up behind him in the line, and we're making our way up to the cash register. And as we approached the cash register, I heard him saying, no, I'll get that. No, I'll get that. You know, he was buying the groceries of other people. It just broke my heart open. It was just so sweet, just so sweet. And the people he was buying stuff for, you could tell that they couldn't afford much, you know. They had that look of, yeah. So it was just really wonderful to see this guy, you know, doing that. So anyway, I left there and went to the HEB, and the HEB again had another line, and I already stood in the line on Sunday night to pick up a few things for an hour. And so they had the same line out there going a different direction, but also in the ice. And I just didn't have the patience for it. I'll come back later. I'm not going to do this. So I ended up going home with my water and snacks and stuff, and trying to coordinate with the lady that was going to go to the shelter. And in the interim, I had heard from a neighbor not far away that said, do you want a shower? I said, are you kidding? You have made my day. So that evening I went over to her house, and it's so nice to be invited into somebody's house. That doesn't happen much these days, you know, COVID and all that. But anyway, with mask, of course. And she invited me in and said, yeah, use as much hot water as you want, and blah, blah, blah. And then when I came out from the shower, she said, oh, and a couple of people there with her granddaughter and some other person. And she said, well, would you like some coffee? I was like, coffee? Are you kidding? Yes. And so I just sat down, and then we were like normal people sitting there with our little masks on, having a conversation. And I don't know about you guys, but I am starved for it. You know, I don't think that ever happens. Very rarely happens. So, so it was, I don't know, I'm so grateful for the whole thing. The shower was wonderful. The coffee was great. And the conversation was just life-saving, I think. You know, you're not alone in this situation, right? So yeah, and then that night I went home and burned my wood and my 1x2s, and I had 2 nights with 1x2s, but the second night was also with real wood that burned. So that was a wonderful night, and we were warm despite the fact that there was heat by then, come to think of it. So anyway, the life was good. So then there was the people next door offered a 5-gallon bucket of water for me, and the siphon thing makes it easier to get the water out. And anytime, come on over and get the water that you need, and you have to boil it, but that's okay. And and offering when they were going to get a meal to buy me a meal, or not to buy me a meal, but to pick up food for me, and which I didn't need, but it was very, very sweet. And then somebody else a couple of days later, last night, that offered a shower. I didn't know the woman, but she offered the shower. And so I went over there, and it was like this brand new, it was a guest room, I guess, upstairs above the garage. And it was so nice. It was like a hotel room. And she had little snacks, she said, feel free to take their snacks, and we've got water here, take your water, and when I was going to go over there, she said, bring your bottles and you can fill up. And it's just so incredibly generous. Yeah. So anyway, that's been my experience, where I feel this whole web of care. Sometimes we can feel so isolated, particularly during disasters, but then people show up and they're like, whatever you want. And I had noticed this during Hurricane Harvey too, in Houston. We went down with Todd to help his sister and family out, and people driving up from as far away as Dallas and Fort Worth, and getting out of the truck and saying, what do you need? We're here. We can pack, we can do, whatever, or here's some beer, or here's some, whatever. So I'm just so struck by it. So my evaluation of this situation has been that indeed there is a web of care out there. And I think it comes forward, particularly in disasters. And I think it's important to remember that. So that's kind of my takeaway of it. But I'm wondering, I'm wondering what other people's experience is with regard to this situation. And on the one hand, and particularly, what is their sense about, the generosity or compassion or just basic kindness that's out there? What has been your experience? And I'm particularly interested if anybody needs help at this point in time. So I open the floor. Anyone who'd like to speak? Yeah, Anne.
Laurie, it reminds me, there's a book that actually Peg recommended to me called Humankind. I don't know if anybody else here has read it, but it's partly just talking about how we are a very community-oriented species. And in World War II, when bombing was going to start in London, there was all these predictions that people were going to be like fighting it out for supplies and very much looking out for them just themselves. And instead, what happened was this great sense of community and people coming together and helping each other. And so what you're saying reminded me of that and resonates. I also, just as another little aside, I don't know if y'all read the story about the HEB. I think I don't remember where it is, like Leander. This is a big, everybody know from Texas. This is a big grocery store chain here in Texas that's really renowned for its community involvement and just lots of other things that it does, are really positive out there in the world. But their power went out. They had all these people in the store, like lines and lines of people in the store. The power goes out, so they can't run their pay terminals. And they just said, okay, just leave with your groceries. You don't need to pay.
Wow.
a person who wrote about it made some post about it, said that was so like everybody was just like so touched and happy. And then in the parking lot, it was like that goodwill extended, and people were helping each other, like push cars and pick up their groceries if they dropped them or something. Anyway, so this is kind of a sweet thing in the midst of everything that unfolded.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Anne. I think there really is something to that. It's contagious, you know. It's like that guy I was seeing paying for everybody's groceries is like, you know, it's contagious. You want to do that. Yeah, Joan.
We were without power for 88 and a half hours and 32 seconds. And after 2 days, the house was 46 inside, and we were just pretty well staying in bed the whole time with covers and reading. And there was a knock on the door, and it was some neighbors, a woman with her 3 kids, and we had fresh snow, you know, I said, kids, have it, that snow, you know, and they were just eating it like mad. And there were no hotel rooms to be had. And she said, we have a reservation. And they had power. And she said, we have a reservation if you would like it. And took about 2 seconds. And I said, we'll take it. And the roads were real dicey, but we were able to get there. And of course, in the hotel, they had no supplies. And the people working there were living there. And some of them had brought their family, and they were working double shifts. And this guy, he says, I'm doing things I never have done before. And at lunch and dinner was the same food. It was 2 meats with either pasta or rice. That's all they had. It was just what was in the kitchen. No salad, no, just nothing. Just those 2 dishes you could choose from. And the staff was so upbeat and caring. And of course, there was no maid service, and who cared? You know, that was it was just, no one cared. We had a warm hall to walk in and get a little exercise. And then we came back home, and there was no heat downstairs, and the hot water doesn't work. And we got someone the next day so that I could turn the heat on if I connected 2 wires, and he had to go get a thermostat the next day. And if it got too hot, you know, because we didn't know how hot it was, then I disconnected the wires. And then, like Laurie, I started hearing water pouring, and it was outside, fortunately, but it was our tankless heater, which was not working, had sprung a leak. And the next day I called my plumber, and he was able to talk me through getting that stopped for the most part. But I've had 3 different neighbors says we can come over there and bathe, and it's just and you know, heard from my friend in Paris, cousins in California. It's just very, very heartwarming. Oh, and then my neighbors that were here that stayed, they've been spending the night at other neighbors who have power. The people across the street all have power. Yeah.
Wow.
And it's just very, very touching how everyone has been reaching out, and no one's been grumpy.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's just been caring and trying to help.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, Cody. Thank you, Joan.
Yeah, so can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was in the Army for a little while, so the actual, you know, we didn't lose power, but we lost our water for a little bit, and I was pretty used to that stuff because we would have to be in the field for months at a time. And but what we did was the night before we boiled a bunch of water and canned it, and then we filled the bathtubs. And then once we started realizing that we had to use maybe like 2.5 gallons to flush. Then what I started doing was boiling snow. So I ended up boiling maybe about total about 50 gallons worth of snow.
Wow.
I mean, of water. I have this like huge crawfish pot that I bought crawfish in. And I had that joker rolling for like 2 days. And
Wow.
so one of my buddies, we're in this veterans group where we talk about, you know, our issues or whatever. I haven't been in a while because of COVID, but he contacted this other guy, the facilitator, and he contacted me because I don't live far away from him, maybe about half a mile, and he was like, he needs help cutting wood for veterans that can't heat their homes or whatever. So I'm like, you know, I'll do it. But then I got in my truck to go to his house, and it was like 22 degrees outside, ice all over the roads, and I couldn't get my truck out of my driveway. So I tried to start my UTV, and I couldn't. The tire was flat, so I was like, man, I give up. But then I was like, you know what? It's just half a mile away. I can walk. And then I ended up walking and chopping the wood, and it was cold. Like I never worked in those kind of conditions before, but you know, I was like, well, worst come to worst, you know, I'll be fine. And then the water came back on briefly to where I was able to take a bath, and then it went back out the next morning, and it was just a mess. But I was just more concerned about my family versus myself, because I have a 9 and a 7-year-old, and my wife, of course. But like I said, I was pretty much used to, you know, not having electricity, having being without water because of the military experiences. But it was just the cold that I'm not used to.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Gosh. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Cody.
Oh, you're welcome.
I figured you were going to try to help somebody. I know how you are.
Oh, Shashi asked a question on the chat. Does anyone have a number for plumber?
Yeah, I do. I have a couple numbers. I'm on a list, and they told me a couple of days, and it's been already probably 4 days, but it's the important thing is to get on the list, So I will, where is she? There you are. So I will send that to you at the end and give you both those numbers and see if you can get in touch with them. Is there anybody else that needs anything?